Megyn Kelly coming through with the instant reaction and analysis on some straight up breaking news. Donald Trump found guilty on all charges in the New York business records trial. She ain't holding back, calling out the whole trial as a sham and predicting them convictions gonna get flipped. For the full scoop, hit up the link in the description.
This is ridiculous. What a sad day. The country's been disgraced. That's what's happened. Alvin Bragg and this judge have disgraced the country. We made it, almost 250 years without doing this. And now, because of falsified business records, we've convicted, as a felon, a former president of the United States. You don't think we could have done something like this to Bill Clinton or Hillary Clinton or others? We had a standard. We didn't do this in America. We aren't a banana republic, or at least we didn't used to be. And don't forget what's happened in this Trump case, in which he's now been found guilty of all 34 counts against him, which was overcharged to begin with. It shouldn't have been a case at all. And once charged, it should have been one count. The whole case boils down to the same alleged scheme, but they stretched it into 34 counts by saying, and that check, and that check, and that check, and that invoice, and that invoice. It was all part of your scheme. So now, but the idea all along was to stop him from becoming president again. That's the idea behind this prosecution. That is the idea behind Letitia James bankrupting his company that he built, and along with his dad, from the ground up in New York, the city that just turned on him. That was the idea behind E. Jean Carroll and her sexual assault case brought 30 years after the fact, alleging a sexual assault/rape in a Bergdorf Goodman dressing room, a case she couldn't even remember the year of the alleged rape in. Stop him. Stop Trump. Why did they wait? Why didn't these cases come until right before the presidential election? The Democrats have been wringing their hands. Wasn't in time. We're not going to be able to call him a convicted felon unless you speed these things up. The judge in the D.C. January 6th case saying, I'll rush back. I'll come back from my European vacation. Don't you worry. If we get Supreme Court opinions allowing my case to go forward with Jack Smith, I'll be there. We've heard about the concern that Fani Willis, her case is going up in appeal, but she's going to try to find some way to pedal to the metal it. We've heard, even in that January 6th case before Judge Chutkan, there may be a plan to try to get him tried even after he wins, if he wins in November. We could have a trial of the president-elect in an effort to get him another conviction so they could convince electors to be unfaithful. Here it is, the proper word, is corrupt. It's a before and after moment for America. What just happened today is a line we can't uncross. And these Democrats will rue the day they decided to use lawfare to stop a presidential candidate. I'm not talking about violence. I'm talking about tit for tat. You just wait, and it won't be Hunter Biden the next time. It's going to be Joe Biden. It could potentially still be Barack Obama. It could still potentially be Hillary Clinton. We're going to have to look at what the statutes of limitations are on the various crimes they surely committed. We're going to have to look at passing laws to revive those dead crimes, felonies or misdemeanors. And John Yoo, an amazing lawyer who worked in the Bush administration, Department of Justice, has a great piece out today talking about how that's the only way they'll learn. The only way to save the republic now is to give them a taste of their own medicine. That's it. Who's getting indicted next? Joe Biden? Maybe Jill Biden. How low can we go? You may not want to see it. That ship has already left port. That horse has left the barn. That's where we're going. So before you celebrate too much over at MSNBC and CNN, who are positively gleeful over this absurd conviction, you wait and ask yourself, what kind of Pandora's box has been opened here?
This was a disgrace. This was a rigged trial by a conflicted judge who was corrupt. It's a rigged trial, a disgrace. They wouldn't give us a venue change. We were at 5% or 6% in this district, in this area. This was a rigged, disgraceful trial. The real verdict is going to be November 5th by the people. And they know what happened here, and everybody knows what happened here. You have a Soros-backed DA, and the whole thing. We didn't do a thing wrong. I'm a very innocent man, and it's okay. I'm fighting for our country. I'm fighting for our Constitution. Our whole country is being rigged right now. This was done by the Biden administration in order to wound or hurt an opponent, a political opponent. And I think it's just a disgrace. And we'll keep fighting. We'll fight till the end and we'll win. Because our country's gone to hell. We don't have the same country anymore. We have a divided mess. We're a nation in decline, serious decline. Millions and millions of people pouring into our country right now. From prisons and from mental institutions, terrorists. And they're taking over our country. We have a country that's in big trouble. But this was a rigged decision right from day one with a conflicted judge who should have never been allowed to try this case, never. And we will fight for our Constitution. This is long from over. Thank you very much.
Long from over is absolutely right. This will be reversed. It will be reversed. This will not stand, mark my words, even in a New York appellate court system that is weighted with Democrats on the bench. The highest court in New York is called the Court of Appeals. It's not completely corrupt. It just overturned the conviction of Harvey Weinstein because he wasn't given a fair trial. They are capable of reaching a rational decision. And if they're not, this could be appealed up higher still to the U.S. Supreme Court. There were state constitutional violations here, and there were federal constitutional violations here. Let me ask you.
Yo, peep this, fam. Jimmy Dore on the mic, dropping truth bombs like grenades. He ain't playing, questioning if we've been fed a line of straight up propaganda from the government and media. Jimmy Dore ain't holding back in this segment. For full context of this episode, click the link in the description below.
Since I started this show, I've lived through a lot of hoaxes perpetrated by the mass media and the establishment. The first one was Russiagate. Second one was the Syria gas attacks and the Syria war. It was the Libya war. It was the Ukraine war. It was COVID. I mean, you can't. It's unbelievable how we are the most propagandized people in the world in the United States, and they don't know it. They have no idea they're being propagandized. They think that Sean Hannity, Anderson Cooper, and Rachel Maddow are telling them the truth. They think the New York Times and the Washington Post, owned by the richest handful of billionaires in the world, are somehow giving you the real truth about their class and their plans. They're not.
Yo, check it. On Timcast IRL, Tim sits down with none other than Trump himself, kicking it for a solid 17 minutes. But hold up, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Kash Patel in the house for the first hour and a half, keeping it realer than real. For the full scoop, hit up the link in the description, cause this episode is straight fire.
In the Ukraine, right? We have given the Ukraine, if we were to stop as the United States government and just stop and make surface-to-air missiles for the next 7 years, that gets America's stockpiles back to neutral. So if someone attacked us right now, we don't have it. So Germany, not 1945 Germany, 2024 Germany. Do you know how many bases we have in Germany? And do you know how much of the economy the U.S. DOD budget in Germany is?
I know it's a lot
today. We are 5% of their freaking GDP.
I'm very concerned about what we're seeing with the Help America vote verification system. Notably, February 17th of this year in Missouri, let's pull up Missouri, 78,421 attempted registrations for people with no IDs. 23,000 were dead. 20th, let's see where they're at with Texas. We've got 249,770, of which 4,600 were dead. 200,000 came back as single match alive. So Texas said we are not doing voter roll cleanup. Well, I know where there's a big number over the past year that reaches around those numbers of people that may be coming here. Many people believe it may be illegal immigrants being given work permits. And then the NGOs just submit that for voter registration because there's a social security number attached to it. We want to know formally and officially what it is. Texas comes out and says, we don't know what that number is. If Texas and Missouri, if Trump wins every swing state and Texas and Missouri by narrow margins flip, Trump loses.
State attorney generals and state secretaries of state control these issues. And that is why people are like, oh, how come we didn't fix this federally? I'm like, you can't fix it federally. It's impossible. You have to rely on these state AGs to bring lawsuits to clean voter rolls. It's Donald Trump is going out to Michigan and Minnesota to the minority communities. It's basically the Bronx over there for that specific style of minority, and he's winning them over because he's exposing the exact same thing. He's like, the Democrats are coming here and have been coming here to buy your vote. Is your life better right now? Are your communities safe? How's your kids' housing and education going? And do you feel like you can have a future in this country? And the minorities are saying, wait a second, we were actually maybe better off where we came from. For the first time in
no
forever.
country can sustain what we're going through. I believe the number is 15, 16 million, could even be 17 million people right now.
Is
that's more than that's bigger than almost all of our states. We have no choice. And these are in many cases, and this is from all over the world, not just South America, which is big enough, but they're coming in from the Congo, they're coming in from all parts of Africa, they're coming in from all parts of Asia, and it's an invasion into our country, and no country can handle this. You know, we defeated ISIS, and we had no new wars because they were concerned with us. I had no wars at all. I finished off a war that we were in for 20 years. So we will work with a lot of people to get the right people in. The difference is I now know sort of everybody.
Yeah.
And I'm not having to be relying on people that I didn't know very well and listen to their recommendations. And I think we're going to have phenomenal people. I know the people. I know the good ones, the bad ones, the weak ones, the strong ones. I think we're going to have great people. Well, first of all, I'm the only one that is going to stop World War III, because this man can't put two sentences together. He doesn't know what he's doing, doesn't know where he is. And amazingly, it seems like he's going to be running. You know, it's a lot of people say, do you think he'll make it to the starting gate? Well, we'll see what happens, because we don't want to see wars. I don't want to see wars. I was in no wars other than we finished a war with ISIS, and we completed it, 100% complete. But I don't want to see wars. I think it's so horrible, so unnecessary, so costly in terms of lives and money in that order. And destroying these countries, you know, you're destroying culture. I think it's just a failed mentality. It's crazy. You can solve problems over a telephone. Instead, they start dropping bombs. I see recently they're dropping bombs all over Yemen. You don't have to do that. You can talk in such a way where they respect you and they listen to you. Viktor Orban of Hungary, you know, the leader, they call him a strong man. Who cares if he's a strong man or not a strong man? He's a very powerful guy. He said the problem the world has is that Donald Trump is no longer president. When he was president, China didn't play around, Russia didn't play around, nobody played around, and we had no problems. Today, the whole world is on fire.
Yo, check it out. We got the PBD podcast in the house, dropping knowledge on the latest headlines. First up, we got the scoop on Donald Trump's appearance at the Libertarian convention, straight up shaking things up. Governor Kathy Hochul throwing shade at Trump's New York crew, calling them clowns. But yo, that ain't all Snopes confirming Ashley Biden's diary is the real deal, adding fuel to the fire. Plus, Elon Musk speaking out against EV tax incentives and fast food becoming a luxury for nearly 80% of Americans. And keep it locked, because we got the lowdown on Biden's relationship with Jill and Israel dropping bombs in Rafah. For the full scoop, hit up the link in the description.
Briefly, Governor Kathy Hochul slammed for calling Trump's New York supporters, you ready for this? Clowns. I think she said it to Jake Tapper. Compared to Hillary's infamous basket of deplorables moment, we'll talk about.
Well, I'll tell you, it won't make a difference at all, Jake, and that is for Donald Trump to be the ringleader of and invite all his clowns to a place like the Bronx. New York will never, ever support Donald Trump for president. We know him better than anyone, and that means we understand what he's all about is just for himself. So this state will go solidly behind Joe Biden for president, as it has in the past. So he wants to spend his time doing these made-up fake rallies and pretending they're support here. Be my guest, because while you're doing that, Donald Trump, Joe Biden's out there on the other side, making sure he's delivering for all Americans. And so go ahead, spend all your time you want in New York, because we'll be with Joe Biden, and Joe Biden's out there winning over the rest of the battleground states.
So, Biden, according to Wall Street Journal, folks, needs a little more empathy. on the economy. Come on, folks. Democrats
come on,
say
guys.
more empathy. Hillary Clinton says she lost 2016 because women voters abandoned her. How dare you, ladies, abandon Hillary Clinton,
Shameful.
the Forbes 2021 International Woman of the Year? How could you do that? James Carville calls Democratic message full of shit. Nearly 80% of Americans now view fast food, ready, as a luxury. Going to fast food restaurant is now a luxury, according to a Lending Tree survey. The perception of fast food as a luxury is particularly strong amongst those making less than $30,000 a year. 71% of people fall in that category. Parents with young children, that's 58%. Gen Z's 58%, and women 53%. Menu prices at major chains like McDonald's, Chipotle, Taco Bell have risen significantly since 2014, outpacing inflation. In response to slowing sales, McDonald's and Wendy's are introducing cheaper meal options, such as $5 value meal and a $3 breakfast deal. George Lucas demolishes woke critics, calling his Star Wars films ready to white. Caitlin Clark, Cameron Brink showcase one-ups LeBron James and the Lakers. Can you imagine the Sparks had more people come to the game than the Lakers? Buttigieg can't explain why Biden has only built 7 or 8 EVs, charging stations. Frustrated illegal immigrants turn to ride-sharing apps after waiting for Border Patrol. This is not a joke. This is an actual story. Future, the Fed probably won't be delivering any interest rate cuts this year. That's CNBC. Housing prices hit another record high as affordability crisis deepens. So, housing prices hits a new record with the median U.S. households hits $387,600, a 4% increase from the previous year, according to Redfin. Despite a slight dip in mortgage rates, 7.02, the monthly mortgage payment remains as high as $28.54. That's the average mortgage payment. Lisa Sturdivant, MLS chief economist, notes elevated mortgage rates and high home prices have been keeping some buyers on the sideline this spring. You think that they've been sitting on the sidelines? The affordability crisis is driven by years of underbuilding, a rise in mortgage rates, and expensive construction materials. This has created a golden handcuff effect where homeowners with low mortgage rates from the pandemic rate reluctant to sell, further limiting supply. Sam Brinton, a Redmond premier agent, says move up buyers feel stuck because they're ready for their next house, but it just doesn't make financial sense to sell with the current interest rates. He's right. With the Federal Reserve unlikely to raise rates before September, housing market analysts expect mortgage rates to remain above 7% for the most of 2024. Fannie Mae predicts the 30-year mortgage rate to reach 7.1 the upcoming quarter, significantly higher than the previous 6.4. While Freddie Mac's baseline scenario includes one rate cut towards the end of the year. Wow, Freddie Mac is now only thinking one, but maintains elevated mortgage rates throughout. Rising inflation caution Fed policies have led to revised forecasts for borrowing costs. Freddie Mac's chief economist, Doug Duncan, noted, we see rates remaining closer to 7%. Through the end of the year, the market has reacted to discouraging consumer price index reports, complicating the outlook for potential buyers and sellers. High mortgage rates have disincentivized homeowners from selling, as many are locked in rates below 4%, Tom. So housing prices hits a new record with the median U.S. households hits $387,600, a 4% increase from the previous year, according to Redfin. Despite a slight dip in mortgage rates, 7.02, the monthly mortgage payment remains as high as $28.54. That's the average mortgage payment. Lisa Sturdivant, MLS chief economist, notes elevated mortgage rates and high home prices have been keeping some buyers on the sideline this spring. You think that they've been sitting on the sidelines? The affordability crisis is driven by years of underbuilding, a rise in mortgage rates, and expensive construction materials. This has created a golden handcuff effect where homeowners with low mortgage rates from the pandemic rate reluctant to sell, further limiting supply. Sam Brinton, a Redmond premier agent, says move up buyers feel stuck because they're ready for their next house, but it just doesn't make financial sense to sell with the current interest. If you look at this is what I want you to think about. Real estate's only had a minus 1% decade once, okay? Stocks has had it twice But look what it is. It's not anything crazy. It's 0.9 and it's 1%. So you're not losing money in the stock market over a decade. But look how many double-digit real estate has versus the stock market. Stock market has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 double-digit. Real estate only has 1. So
look, what I see here is that it takes a literal worldwide pandemic for real estate to actually compete with the stock market. How could you say such a thing? Just look at the numbers. They've had one time during the pandemic that they've been above double digits, real estate. But if you're just looking for sheer numbers and sheer return, it's not even close. The last thing here is 50% of the people, 2/3 of Americans buy houses, 1/3 rent. Only 50% invest in the stock market, 50% don't. What's the difference here? I would argue that it's just way harder to understand the stock market. It's bulls, it's bears, it's bells, it's red, it's green, it's up, it's down. Which way is it? It's like the S&Ps, the Dows, the NASDAQ. People just don't understand. But people understand real estate. But money talks, bullshit walks. It's clear stock market is better than real estate.
Dollar cost averaging wins long term to people who are not expert investors. Everybody wants to time stuff, right? Well, if I would have only timed it well, look at this year, 2023, Magnificent 7 rate of return. This is just 2023. Okay. Apple last year did 48%. Microsoft up 57%. Alphabet 59%. Amazon 81%. Tesla 102%. Meta 194%. Look at NVIDIA. Wow. 239% last year.
Crazy.
They showed a number the other day that if you would have put $10,000 in NVIDIA, I don't know what the number was 7 years ago, 8 years ago, compared to the other stocks, it was number one. Your $10,000 now worth $3.1 million. So Biden just did this. 100% tariff. That's 2 weeks ago. 100% tariff rate on EVs will protect American manufacturers from China's unfair trade practices. This action advances President Biden's vision of ensuring the future of the auto industry will be made in America by American workers. So check this out. He makes this 100% tariff. 4x is what Trump did.
Wow.
But it's $9,700. And comparable to our cheapest EV that we have, which is $33,000, $35,000, they're nearly 4 times cheaper than us. 4 times cheaper than us. So now, if the tariff is at 25% only, and they bring this car to U.S. to sell, you know how much he's going U.S.? $12,300. Okay?
Still a great deal.
It's nothing compared to what we have.
Oh, man.
But even 100%, if they put 100% tariff, these cars are coming here and they're going to sell it for $19,400. Elon Musk said this, the Chinese car companies were the most competitive and will have significant success outside of China, keyword he uses, depending on what kind of tariffs or trade barriers are established. He said this 4 days ago. When did Biden put that 100% tariff? May 15th. What's today's date? The 28th. So he said this on the 24th, 9 days after Biden puts the 100% EV tariff on there. Tom, can you tell everybody who Stellantis is? Because most people don't know who Stellantis is.
Chrysler. It's the new way to pronounce Chrysler as of 2 years ago. They kind of rebranded.
Look what he says.
Daimler Chrysler.
The entire industry is worried about the magnitude of what Stellantis CEO Carlos Tavares calls it, ready? The China offensive. Companies that can't match China's low-cost EVs are going to be, ready? Keywords. In an existential problem.
Bullshit. Let me explain. It's election year, and cars are made by the UAW. This is this tariff is attempting to win votes from the
100%.
UAW. And that is what's going on this year, number one. Number two, the Stellantis CEO is right. He called the tariff a trap.
This is EV stock performance in America. EV stock performance in America. Look at the lowest one. You can't find that one, can you? You see the orange one all the way at the bottom? That's Fisker.
Yeah, exactly.
Fisker is down 98% for the year.
Oh, man.
Vinny, did you hear? Q1. Fisker is down 98%. Look at Rivian, down 48%. Can you zoom in on all this stuff on the right? We can see the numbers better for the audience. Zoom in a little bit. It won't allow you. Okay, there you go. NIO is another one, down 47%. Xpeng is down 45%. Lucid is down 31%. Polestar is down 30%. VinFast is down 29%. Tesla is down 29.2%. iAuto is down minus 12.5%. And then the only one that's up 24.8% is this Nikola, which I think is a hydrogen driving car. That's a very unique, different story that's going on there, but nothing crazy, right? So you look at this, and he said, okay, why are all these guys down, including Tesla? By the way, during the same period, I looked at to see how BYD performed, maybe to say, well, everybody is down. BYD is only down 0.5% for the year. It's the China car. Now, okay, so here, this is interesting. Minerals in electrical vehicles versus gas cars. Green is what it takes to build EVs, okay? Green is the EVs, black is the gas cars, okay? So zoom in a little bit from the biggest green to the smallest green. So to build an EV, you need 66.3 kilograms of graphite, okay? Then you need 53.2 kilograms of copper. For gas, you only need 22.3 kilograms of copper for a gasoline car. For EV, you need 39.9 of nickel. You need 24.5 of manganese. Okay, you only need 11.2 kilograms for a gas. You need 13.3 of cobalt, 8.9 of lithium. Anyways, this continues, right? All these rare metals that you need. Well, guess what country, natural resources, has the most of these rare metals? Go to the next slide.
China?
Red China. This next chart may give you the chills because this is probably the most scariest chart out of all of them that the next one that he's going to pull up. Go ahead and pull it up. Check this out. Zoom in. This is from 2010 to 2024. China cars are heading mostly to new drivers in emerging markets. Look at this. 2010, China's last place. 11, last place. 12, last place. Last place, last place. 2020, they pass up U.S., and we're declining. They pass up South Korea. Then they pass up Germany. They just passed up Japan. China is officially number one. In how many years from last to first? In less than 4 years. Look at it.
Yeah, look at 2019.
From 21, in 3 years, they went from last to first place. California is experiencing the weirdest problem. Here's a problem, Vinny. They now have so many people driving EVs that guess what's happening?
No electricity?
No, they don't know where to get the gas tax money anymore.
Oh, wow.
So they push so many people away from gas. Now they're going to start taxing EV drivers.
What? It's a Wall Street Journal story on Slack. It says California's $25 an hour minimum wage boomerang. Governor Gavin Newsom says the law he signed last October would add to the state's fiscal woes, and he ignored the warnings at the time, and now he's trying to reverse course. Lo and behold, why? Because the burdensome budget costs are threatening liberal programs.
All right, check it on the Flagrant podcast with guest Charlamagne Tha God. They're diving deep into how both sides of the media be using Charlamagne to spin their narratives. Hit up the link in the description below for full podcast context.
Like, Charlamagne will be used by every side of the media to prove whatever their agenda is.
That's right.
So is there a new stress that comes with that now?
No, here's the thing. The right does a phenomenal job of pushing their narratives.
Okay.
Whatever their narrative is, for the past few months, it's been, black people are moving away from Democrats.
Yeah.
Donald Trump has 22% of black people say right now they'll vote for Donald Trump. I think that's a little overstated. But they're anything that pushes that narrative, they're for it.
Yeah.
So, and it's been like this probably for the past 8-9 months. So if I'm critical of the Democratic Party,
They lock in.
Regardless of anything else I say about Trump, whatever, they lock in on that. The left never finds a way to create its own narratives. The left just responds to whatever the right puts out there.
And then calls them racist or sexist or
or calls me a MAGA supporter or whatever.
Right.
So I could literally say in the same sentence, this happened on John Carl's show. I can say Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. He wanted to suspend the Constitution, overthrow the results of an election, but Joe Biden's an uninspiring candidate with no main character energy. Fox don't give a fuck about that first part.
That second part.
Give me that. This is what I want. I want the uninspiring candidate, main character energy. And so everybody on the left replies to that as if I didn't just say this other stuff about Trump.
That View clip, you handled it incredibly well. But
I don't know what they wanted me to say.
Can you give context to the clip for everybody?
Well, yes, I said that I'm not endorsing anybody for president this year. And, Sonny from The View basically was like, it was irresponsible of me to do that. And she said, this isn't the time to sit this out. This ain't the election to sit out. I never said I was sitting out.
Yeah.
Never once have I said I'm sitting out. Never once have I said I'm not voting. None of these things have happened.
Yeah.
All I'm simply doing is being critical of both parties.
Which you should.
And my interest this year one of my interests is preserving democracy.
Right.
So I'm going to vote for whoever I think can preserve democracy.
The Democratic candidates are so weak that their only hope is vote against
It's
Trump.
so silly.
That's all they have.
But yo, I've told other personalities in media that y'all spend so much time talking about how bad Trump is. Yeah. You never tell me any of the good things that Biden is doing.
Do it.
And then you wonder why people say, well, what the hell is Joe Biden doing?
Yeah.
Or what the hell is Vice President Harris doing?
Very true.
I can't find out from the people who support them because your whole feed is how bad Trump is.
I think their whole angle is vote for not him.
Yeah.
And if your angle is vote for not him, you just got to make him as bad as possible, make him
because
super
to your
radioactive.
point, Biden is uninspiring, so I can't inspire you to vote for him in my brain.
That's
Democrats don't believe in Biden.
Yeah.
You know what the truth is? It's not even about none of that. These motherfuckers care about ratings. They care about clicks. They care about engagement.
Yeah.
And the reality is Donald Trump moves the needle.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And not only does Donald Trump move the needle, people who are supposedly left-leaning criticizing Democrats moves the needle. You know why? Because it gets motherfuckers going on social media. So if I saw the whole context of what Charlamagne said, fuck the whole context of what he said. Let's just take this part of him saying Joe Biden's uninspiring, and then let's retweet it, and somebody's going to say, this is the type of rhetoric that's going to get Donald Trump elected. And so then it turns into, Charlamagne don't know what the fuck he talking about politics, to Charlamagne made Little Mama cry, to Charlamagne homophobic, Charlamagne transphobic, Charlamagne misogynistic. Now it's just this whole thing about me in a lot of ways, but it all goes right back to that one original clip.
They make it look like you're supporting the other side.
That's right.
And then when it looks like you're supporting the other side, they have to make you radioactive.
That's right.
They got to attack your character to basically cut your legs out from under you so you don't inspire and influence people to support the other side. When in reality, if they just played the whole clip, everything would have been explained.
Everything would have been explained, and it probably would have been a better discussion.
Yeah. Well, they don't want good discussions. They just want echo chambers.
They don't.
The one thing I don't understand is The Rock also said he's not endorsing anybody. Taylor Swift also said she's not endorsing anybody, but that I feel no one was outraged about.
Because they need the black vote, and Charlamagne is influential within the black community.
All right, listen up. Russell Brand's segment is bringing the heat, dropping knowledge bombs that'll blow your mind. We're talking to former head of the CDC spilling the tea on vaccine side effects, and an NIH official finally admitting to taxpayers funding gain of function research in Wuhan. After years of denials, they're finally coming clean. For the full context of this episode, hit up the link in the description because Russell Brand isn't holding back.
Of misinformation not coming from the places that are being censored, extraordinarily enough, but from the places that are being sanctioned, from state-funded media, from privately funded media organisations, from the kind of organisations that will never, like Rumble, have to leave Brazil on point of principle, or leave France on point of principle, or be booted out of Russia. It's a equal opportunities global censorship endeavour that we're experiencing right now. Let's have a look at them attempting to continue to mitigate the truth around the funding of research in Wuhan.
Dr. Fauci, do you still support funding of the NIH funding of the lab in Wuhan?
Senator Paul, with all due respect, you are entirely and completely incorrect that the NIH has not ever and does not now fund gain of function research in the Wuhan Institute
Do they fund
of
Dr.
Virology.
Barrick?
Dr. Tabak, did NIH fund gain-of-function research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology through EcoHealth?
It depends on your definition of gain-of-function research. If you're speaking about the generic term, yes, we did.
Let's have a look what Elon Musk posted about that. Prosecute /Fauci. Sick lies. After years of falsehoods, health official bits, US funded it. Amazing. Eco Health Alliance funding is suspended.
Check it out. On the Matt Walsh podcast, Robert De Niro steps up and holds a press conference outside Trump's trial in New York, but things don't go as planned. It's a wild ride. You got to hit up the link in the description for the full scoop.
Doubled. The Biden campaign held a press conference outside of the Trump trial in New York today, and their featured speaker was, for some reason, Robert De Niro. This is the legal expert that they brought in to pontificate on the subject. And we'll start with this. We have two clips here. We'll start here as Robert De Niro is struggling. He's got something to say, but he's struggling to get it out. Let's listen.
Thank you. I mean, this is really, even these people over here are kind of, it's kind of crazy. It's really crazy, and this thing, Donald Trump has created this. He should be telling them not to do this, but he's just he wants to sow total chaos, which he's succeeding in some areas and places to do. Anyway, beside all that, this is my neighborhood, downtown New York City. I grew up here and feel at home in these streets. I feel comfortable.
Some great insights there. Wow. It's really crazy. It's kind of really crazy. It's just crazy. The whole thing is crazy. Just a crazy thing. This thing is. So they brought Robert De Niro in for that kind of analysis. Trump is sowing chaos, he says, full-on chaos. And meanwhile, there are like two people shouting in the background. That's the chaos. Two people. And that's assuming that the people shouting are actually Trump supporters, which they could easily, it could be the other way too, of course, as we know. But that's what he says chaos is. Now, did Robert De Niro ever accuse the BLM rioters of sowing chaos? I'm guessing not. Burning and looting isn't chaos. A guy shouting on a street corner is. Okay, then. Overall, a great strategy by the Biden campaign, because you've got Joe Biden, who's a geriatric president, a guy who rambles incoherently. And so they choose as his spokesman at this press conference a geriatric actor who also rambles incoherently. But there was another great moment where De Niro offered a dire warning to America. You're going to want to hear this because, well, this is pretty shocking. Listen.
Under Trump, this kind of government will perish from the earth. I don't mean to scare you. No, wait, maybe I do mean to scare you. If Trump returns to the White House, you can kiss these freedoms goodbye that we all take for granted. And elections, forget about it. That's over. That's done. If he gets in, I can tell you right now, he will never leave. He will never leave. You know that. He will never leave.
This government will perish from the earth, he says. Well, don't threaten us with a good time, Robert. But nobody believes this. No one actually believes this. No one actually thinks that Trump will bring an end to the government and install himself as a military dictator. No one thinks that. When you look at what he's actually done, he's shown no interest in being anything approaching a dictator. If anything, he has been shy about wielding, when he was in office, he was shy about wielding the legitimate legal authority he actually had. I mean, this is someone who he didn't even fire Fauci when he could have. He could have, he didn't. So that is the actual criticism, the legitimate criticism of Trump's first term in office. You talk about incitement. In reality, when you say this kind of thing, that he's not going to ever leave, he's going to be a dictator, it's going to be the end of life as we know it, the end of our freedoms, everything, you are actually trying to incite violence against Trump. You're basically trying to encourage someone to assassinate him. That's what you're doing. You are providing an argument for someone to go and do that. And you're doing it intentionally. And I can't think of any other reason to say this sort of thing. Because you don't believe it. The idea that he's going to bring an end to the government. De Niro, as kooky as he is, doesn't actually believe that. The American public doesn't buy it. It's not politically persuasive. Because no one buys it. So why are you even saying it? I can only come to one conclusion. Which is that there's a very small smattering of people out there who are crazy enough to actually think that's true. And you are trying to inspire them to take drastic action.
All right, peep this. On Steven Crowder's Talking with People segment, he chops it up with some young women who are feeling like they've been straight up deceived by their post-secondary educations. They struggling to find jobs in their fields and feeling like they ain't got the same opportunities as their parents. But check it, they start realizing that conservative policies might be where it's at for them. It's a whole new vibe, even young women in America leaning towards Trump. For the full context, hit up the link in the description below.
Do you have something that's at the front of your mind as far as this election? Like, what's most pressing? Like, what do you think is at stake?
Really, I don't know what's at stake, but I would like to be a homeowner.
Okay.
Yeah, and I feel like it's not a great time.
It's not the best.
I don't feel like I have the same opportunities my parents do, so I'm like, oh, I would love to be a homeowner.
We've heard that a lot from younger people today, that getting into home ownership is tough.
Yeah.
What do you think, you say?
From what I heard, because I work in the private airline industry, and so for corporate aviation, I heard if a certain party gets elected, they're going to be taxing on corporate jets, and so I would be out of business.
Right.
So that's one of my concerns.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how do you feel the economy is as far as job opportunities for people in your age?
It's very difficult. I have a degree in marketing, and it's so hard to even get an entry-level position as a marketer.
Really?
And they want to offer $20 an hour and require a bachelor's, which is ridiculous. You can't live off of that in Dallas.
Yeah.
$20 an hour?
15. I've seen. I've gone on Indeed, and even 15 for entry-level marketing positions is what they're offering. And even for me, it's hard to get something like that, even though I have experience.
Mm-hmm.
So it's difficult for our generation, and I'm sure it's difficult for everybody in general.
Because you also mentioned, this is interesting to me, you mentioned $20 an hour plus a bachelor's. Because there are a lot of jobs out there that are over $20 an hour that don't require a college education.
That's true.
Does a part of you, and we've heard this from some people today, feel like you were lied to a little bit? Like, get an education?
I feel very lied to. So I went to med school. I did my master's, my bachelor's, med school a little bit, and then I switched to tech. So at this point, I'm like, why did I go to school?
Right.
Yeah. So I'm like,
I be a doctor.
Yeah.
And then realized
so
quickly.
now I'm like, I mean, maybe if I got a computer science degree, maybe it is worth it.
Right.
But the cost to, like, the benefit, I don't know.
Yeah.
I could have just gone straight into my job, honestly.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of societal pressure to get a college degree, even though nowadays it honestly doesn't mean much. Because you have UPS drivers making, what is it, 100
grand a year.
100 grand a year. So it's like, you don't need a degree for that kind of job. So why am I putting thousands of dollars into getting a college degree? On top of that, I feel like diversity is being prioritized over experience, because in the aviation industry, that's what they're doing at a lot of airlines. They're hiring for diversity purposes instead of experience. So you're having a lot of these issues with, they're saying the Boeing manufacturing is terrible quality control. But a lot of it is because of the new hires, the new pilots that don't have as much experience, but they're hired because of the diversity quotas that they're trying to fulfill.
So with all that being said, who do you think is best, or at this point in time, how do you think it goes? Do you think there's one person who's better than the other to kind of rectify this or provide you with more opportunity? The opportunities that you said maybe your parents had that you feel you didn't.
Anyone?
I personally don't feel like there is anyone on the top of my head that I see fit more than the other.
We want a third option.
Yeah. I just honestly, like, we saw what Trump America was like, and although the economy was booming, like, Biden's America has been very hard. I got laid off. I was doing accounting at a construction company, and I was making great money, and it pushed me back into school because all of these places want you to have a bachelor's and stuff, and I was just straight off experience. There was a lot of issues with Trump too, just all the hatred and racism that comes with it that people associated with Trump, and all the protests that happened, the violence. So all of that is what made me feel very sad to see people breaking into Targets, breaking into Walmarts to make their voices known, that they're minorities or they're not getting their voices heard. A lot of that I found very disturbing, and I don't want to see that happen again.
And forgive me, how is that Trump's doing? People breaking into Target or Walgreens in San Francisco?
Well, it was a lot of it was him persuading people to do something about what they're unhappy about, and breaking into the White House and things like that. It just seemed like it fueled people to do something just out of the ordinary.
Yeah. But it seems like all these, you're talking about, for example, Black Lives Matter, the Summer of Love,
yes,
with the billion, and now you're seeing it with Palestine, on campus. that those were people in opposition to what Trump stands for. It seems like really if you were to take that and segment it out and say, okay, these were radical leftists who were committing acts of violence.
Yes.
But then go back to what you said, the economy was booming, I got laid off. It seems like one of those things where maybe it's personality
there was
versus
like pros
results.
and cons. It was pros and cons, I think, to both.
Yeah.
But I do think that the economy was better under Trump, for sure.
Right.
Definitely.
That seems to be an overarching theme today.
But another thing too, I do want to know, like the student loan debt. That was something that was brought up by Biden, and that never really happened.
False promises by the president.
It's a lot of false promises, and it makes us give up hope on Biden. And even then, I wasn't really a huge fan of him.
Yeah,
right.
Me neither.
But still, it just makes me not
want him in the office again, for sure,
Right.
not Biden.
Well, it seems like student loans not such a great thing, considering that you said the degree is not worth the paper it's printed on.
It's not.
But that's what you're pressured into whenever you're younger, right out of high school. You know, your family pressures you to get a degree because degree equals, you know, a great job, and that's what you have in your head when you're a kid.
Right.
So you obviously stick to that, but it's not what the reality is.
Right. And there were a lot of people who were upset on the other side of the coin with student loans. You know, for example, people who either paid off their loans or people who chose not to go to school because they said, I don't think it's going to, they went to go work in an oil rig.
Yeah.
And they're paying taxes, saying, I don't really think that my tax dollars should go to forgive a loan for whatever it is, a gender studies degree.
Right.
And it seems like everything that people say maybe was good under Biden was kind of a promised government program that came from tax dollars.
Yeah.
Is that something that you've...
I definitely don't think our tax dollars are going in the right places. Our education is not the highest. The food in our school system is poison. There is a lot that we're lacking in America that could be improved and focused on. I feel like the pharmaceutical industry wants us to be sick, wants us to have cancer, wants us to be on medication because it's $1 billion industry. So the fact that we could grow our own food and be organic, it's not something that I feel like the country focuses on or wants to push, but would be the best.
Right. So not big fans of the big pharmaceutical industries? No. What about the COVID mRNA vaccine?
Oh, no.
No?
Definitely not.
No?
I'm not vaccinated, so no.
I'm not vaccinated. I've had COVID twice, and everybody that had COVID in the office was vaccinated, and I got COVID from someone who had their vaccine.
It's unfortunate that businesses at the time are pushing for the vaccination.
Right.
And so I remember like going into one of the businesses I was like companies, they were pushing for the vaccine. I was like I'm not getting
to do it.
I'm not getting that.
I did it. I don't care.
You did it?
Yeah.
All right. So you didn't. You did. Another broken promise. You said someone who was vaccinated gave you COVID?
Yes.
Remember, if you get the vaccine, you can't get it, or at the very least, you can't transmit it.
Yeah.
That's like, well, you'll transmit it and you can get it, but it won't be as severe. Like, well, it may be severe, but you won't be in a hospital and a death. Another broken promise.
Another broken
a lot
promise.
of like issues with the vaccine are coming up, right?
Yes, with women and fertility and things like that.
As you mentioned China, but then you mentioned solar and wind, where first off, this is one place where I would disagree. There is no country that's made that work. It's not efficient energy. We just spoke with a man from Germany, right? They went away from nuclear while France went to nuclear, 0 carbon emissions. Solar, wind didn't work. It's been a disaster for Germany. And I don't know if you know where those solar panels come from, or even talking about electric vehicles. China. China really is in charge of not only the batteries, but they're actually the #1 producer now of EVs. And as these regulations come into place to force everyone to go to EVs, you're going to embolden and empower China. Where I don't know if they don't have the strictest emission standards over there in China.
Yes, and I think that we've had a huge reliance on China. I also learned that environmental science, where we have the resources, but the labor cost is cheaper in China.
Sure.
So a lot of the resources that we're getting from China are available in other countries, but because their labor is so cheap, that's why we keep outsourcing to them, which is giving them so much power, which is another thing that I feel like we should get away from.
Right.
Yeah.
Everybody says China
For
all the
sure.
time. So you still don't know how you're going to vote, though? Because Trump's a dick.
Yeah.
But everything you say, China, the vaccine, the rollout, all these broken promises.
It's a hard election for sure. Out of all of the ones, I think this is one of the more important ones, especially since we're declining so fast. And I think that our country has been seen as weak since Biden has been in office, which is very concerning.
So you're not going to vote for Biden, it sounds like.
No, heck no.
But you're reticent to pull that lever.
We'll see. We'll see what happens.
I think you know how you're going to vote. You just have to go, I don't know.
It's hard.
Yeah. How about yourself?
I definitely have to vote for Trump because my job relies on it.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
but it's unfortunate because, I'm not really much into politics, but I know that that's going to really affect my job opportunities, so I have to, that's the route I have to go.
And were you old enough to vote last election?
Mm-hmm.
So who did you vote for last election?
I didn't vote.
You didn't vote? Did any of you vote?
I didn't vote.
You didn't vote?
I voted.
Yeah? Who did you vote for?
I voted for Biden.
You voted for Biden. Okay. Do you think you'll do that again?
I'm not sure.
Okay. It sounds like because there's been a lot of shifting we've noticed today where a lot of people said, I voted for Biden, I'm not going to do that again. I've heard that a lot today.
So many policies are so old where the Congress is paying themselves all this money and they get to be in there forever and they're on these old ideas. We need fresh, young, new people in there who are making the decisions versus people who are like literally not even showing up to work and getting paid our tax dollars, which people don't focus on, but that is a big thing.
Yeah.
Most people in Congress are like 90, 80, like how can they make a feasible decision on what our lives are now?
Right.
Because everything's different.
Would you say a reason maybe that you're voting for Trump this time, and I know you're undecided, but even considering it, is because of the contrast where, like you said, the economy was booming, like you lived under a term of Trump, and for any of the negatives, you see the difference economically, and now you have Biden. Like, do you think that's something that maybe hasn't happened in your lifetime where you go, there's a noticeable change?
Yeah, I mean, we bought our house on that interest rate. It was like 3%, and I was making a ton of money, and things were good. I was living the life, and now I'm not. So that definitely hurts you when you're able to provide a certain life for your family and then it gets taken away because interest rates are higher, because of the interest rates, it's like a domino effect on everything, everybody's livelihood. We're millennials, so people in our generation are stuck with what the boomers did and the generations after us, and their decisions are still overpowering our lives.
Right. Big fan of what Trump did for the economy. I held my nose when I voted for him. He was an unknown. I would actually disagree with you, since you're asking me on the idea of these protests. I mean, you look at it, Black Lives Matter. You look at what happened with Antifa. You look what's happening right now with the pro-Hamas protests. These are not, these, by the way, they're funded by either foreign entities or AstroTurf. And it's designed to make you think exactly what you think. Oh my gosh, if Trump gets in, we'll have to deal with riots. And I don't think that really our democratic republic, our representative republic, should be subject to mob rule. You should never be afraid to vote because Trump didn't call people to commit those wanton acts of violence. I mean, that entire summer, right, where they're burning down cities.
Anyone could have been
But obviously
president.
the general population is going to correlate that with Trump.
With the president.
With the president.
I think everybody will blame the president no matter what. But also we haven't had that kind of hatred and riots since like his administration minus the Palestine stuff.
Sure we have, yeah, that was pretty bad. And we had Black Lives Matter before he was coming in, right? That was a big reason that he won, right?
Yeah.
They were burning down cities, so they just acted up again. And I think that if you were to ask yourself, who has not called for violence versus, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden saying they're not going to stop rioting in the streets, nor should they stop. They need to make their voices heard. I would disagree that I don't think that you're making anything heard by stealing from a Walgreens. And I don't think that has anything to do with Trump.
That's true.
I think it's just that person's an asshole. Because there are plenty of people who are poor in that same neighborhood who've not decided to rob their neighbor.
Right.
But that's just my opinion on it. I think that they do want you to see that and be afraid.
Yes.
And go, gosh, like you've said, economy was better for my own self-interest to not only my jobs, but as far as America's standing. Yeah, but I'm afraid because of this violence. I would ask, if that's kind of the only thing standing in your way, I would ask yourself, well, why is that?
Yeah.
Some people
I would
want
say
you
that's
afraid.
the biggest thing is the hatred associated with that.
Do you think he hated anybody though, Donald Trump?
I don't think so. I think that he's just a regular person that really wants to make big changes. But people are perceiving it in a different way. Everybody is taking what he's doing in different ways, and not every. But I do agree with a lot of the things that he says. Like, if you're a girl, you're a girl. You're a boy, you're a boy. And I might get a lot of hate for that.
You will.
But that's the truth. You were born that way. Is there an issue if you want to change it later on? No. Be who you want to be. But when you're born, the fact that they don't even want to identify a baby anymore, like, clearly you were born with a gender, whether you want to believe that's you or not. That's one thing that I know Trump's pretty strict about.
Yeah, you're going to have to vote Trump. You have Biden where he said he thought it was evil for parents to not affirm their children's gender transition. Like you said,
That's
it's
ridiculous. I don't think children have the mental capacity to make that decision.
Check it out. On the Truth Podcast, Vivek Ramaswamy and Dr. Vinay Prasad are breaking it down. They're talking about whether American patients are living better or worse lives today because of the FDA and other health-focused agencies. It's a real talk about healthcare, fam. For the full context, hit up the link in the description below.
But for today's topic, we're going to focus on the health-focused agencies, particularly with a special focus on the FDA. Are American patients better off or are they worse off because of the existence and the mandate of the FDA?
Before that, I was a biotech entrepreneur. I founded a biotech company called Roivant. I led it as CEO for 7 years, founded it in 2014. Today, the company just had its 10-year anniversary. More recently, earlier this month, I've overseen the development of 5 medicines, 5 of which went on to become FDA approved, many more which failed along the way. But I have interacted with the FDA, and I know something about the FDA, like most people in the pharmaceutical industry do, but they're not allowed to talk about it. Here's what one of the dirtiest little secrets is in the pharmaceutical industry is an old adage that goes, FDA never forgets. If you criticize the FDA, you know you can expect adverse consequences in response. Does that mean they're not going to approve your drug when it comes up to the time of approval? Actually, it's far more insidious than that. Most people don't understand this. It's not like the FDA just makes a decision on the back end after you've done all of your trial work, deciding on the back end of whether or not it gets approved or not. It's not a binary question. Turns out the entire process, all the way from the conception of your idea in a lab, your preclinical testing, all the way to testing in animals, all the way to the early human testing in healthy volunteers, to patients, all of that, every little micro step is actually gatekept by the FDA. So if you do something the FDA doesn't like, they will actually blackball you at every step along the way in a manner that will never be visible to the public. It's not going to be some sort of politically palpable approval decision at the end to say they rejected your drug. That's not how it works. And this is a perfect example of how the deep state works more broadly. It works not through a bang, but through a whimper, through the boring motions of the administrative process, through the technocracy. They bore you into actually effectuating their own agendas. Now, we've talked a lot about medical choice in the last several years in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic and the COVID vaccines. And in that context, medical choice means that I shouldn't have to take something just because the FDA has approved it. But the mirror image of medical choice, which I also believe in equally, is that just because the FDA hasn't approved something doesn't mean that you shouldn't be able to take it if you want to make a decision for yourself about what the health consequences are or aren't to you, especially for life-saving therapies or potentially life-saving therapies that people are otherwise desperately denied if they haven't been through the FDA process. The FDA hates this law. They hate the existence of this law because it creates an alternative road, an alternative path that allows patients and innovators to sidestep the FDA. And they hate that. So effectively what they, through the back door, transmitted subliminally and indirectly, and perhaps even directly to industry, was the idea that if you use this to make your therapy available, you will face the consequences. Not only when you try to get approval for that very therapy through the main process, but even for any other therapy that comes in through the IND, the Investigational New Drug Application process in the first place. That is the retribution of the administrative state. It's not just the FDA. You see it in 3-letter agencies across the board. There are countless other 3-letter agencies that will come after you if you dare to sue them for questioning one of their regulations. But are prescription drug prices higher today because of the FDA? The answer to that question is absolutely yes. I mean, there's no doubt about that fact. The FDA is a gatekeeper to competition. The fact that they're a gatekeeper to competition is used, you could say exploited, but I'll just say used by the pharmaceutical industry to be able to forestall further competition to their own drugs. And in certain categories where they know the payers are going to pay for it even when there is competition, then they'll use the FDA in those categories, say in the category of cancer drugs, to be able to shepherd drugs through because they're going to get the minimal price that's paid for anyway. But in other areas, they actually use the FDA as a gatekeeper to make sure that they're insulated from competition, from drugs that could be made by compounding pharmacies or even generics providers, that the FDA is able to serve as a regulatory, technocratically stamped, regulatorily accepted gatekeeper to preserving the absence of competition, which actually drives up prescription drug prices. So, but it's fascinating then that the same agency that has said for years that you cannot have a safely developed drug or vaccine unless it has been through 10 years of testing, on average $1 billion or more for the development of each of those drugs or vaccines, that you cannot even have the right to try that medication or that vaccine for yourself. It would be too dangerous if it hadn't gone through that process, that same agency is the one that shepherded right through the process a vaccine that was developed in a matter of 9 months,
which then the federal government not only made available and said that you have an opportunity to use, despite the fact that it only was developed in 9 months, but that you have no choice but not to take after it was developed for just 9 months. You can't believe both of these things at the same time.
A bit of your background. You're not a political actor, and I think it's worth people understanding where you're coming from first before we dive into some thorny questions.
Sure. So by way of background, I'm a professor here at the University of California, San Francisco. I'm actually a professor in the Department of Epidemiology and Biostatistics, and I run a research laboratory where we study drug policy, drug regulation, evidence-based medicine, clinical trials through a purely, I think, scientific lens. I'm also a practicing doctor. I happen to be a hematologist oncologist. I work here at the county hospital, which is our safety net hospital, where we take care of pretty much anyone who walks through the door here in San Francisco General Hospital. And I've been in academic medicine since I finished my training about 10 years ago. There's a little bit. Some of the issues on COVID-19 policy that I was outspoken about, to me, are just such basic common sense. It would be ridiculous for a doctor not to be outspoken about it. One example, I think, is I was extremely critical of the CDC's policy decision to make 2-year-olds wear cloth masks, which was done in the United States, but not done anywhere else in the world, not done in Europe, not done in Australia. To me, that struck me as a extremely reckless decision that's based on poor evidence and runs counter to common sense when you see a 2-year-old wearing a cloth mask. That to me somehow created a lot of controversy to be opposed to something which I think is obviously silly. But I think you have to say it and you have to articulate the evidence. And so that's
what exactly did you say, and what was some of the backlash? Now that we have some distance from it, we can reflect on this a little bit.
I mean, in 2021, in The Atlantic magazine, which is by no means a right-leaning magazine, if anything, it's a liberal bastion, I wrote an article called "The Case Against Masking Young Children." And it was extremely critical of the American Academy of Pediatrics, which I think has been captured by some of this kind of groupthink, and extremely critical of the policy decision to mask kids between the ages of 2 and 5, which runs counter, again, to any nation globally. That article created such a backlash. I think there were hundreds, perhaps thousands of emails sent to the university that I should be fired, that I was sort of a misinformation peddler, for merely being in line with the policies of the European CDC and other nations. I think we forget at how hot it was back in the COVID policy debates, how much people lost their sanity and lost their cool and made, I think, a number of bad decisions, from school closure to the mandates to masking young kids, et cetera. Whether or not these agencies deserve the powers that they have been granted. I mean, should the CDC be a 40,000 person agency and not have a single person in the agency with the common sense to say, if we tell the public that you should make a 2-year-old wear a cloth mask in daycare, except for the 2 hours a day when they're all napped side by side, if you tell the public that that's a policy that makes sense and the CDC endorses that, you might not be surprised when a few years later they don't trust any single thing you say, because what you said was patently absurd, right? So to me, I think it does raise questions about these institutions, whether or not they should be as big as they are, what kind of oversight they have, who do they actually work for? Do they work for the people, or do they work for their own intrinsic interests? And I think the questions you're asking about FDA, I think, are important and the correct questions that go beyond COVID. I mean, I think they extend to, we could talk about Alzheimer's drugs and cancer drugs, which I think we will. The question of whether or not the FDA is serving the public's interest or merely a hurdle that justifies high drug prices. So I think you're absolutely spot on that the indisputable fact is that the FDA regulation is a key gatekeeper to the price of drugs in this country. It increases the administrative burden to bring a drug to market. The question is, as a result of that, do we get better and safer and more effective drugs? And I think that's really come under question in the last few years. Start by talking about the capture part. I mean, the capture part of the FDA is that, while the FDA employees work at the FDA, they are technically prohibited from working for or consulting for pharmaceutical firms. But when they leave the FDA, 60 or 70% of people end up working for or consulting for the pharmaceutical firms. And I believe in the primaries, you were critical of Governor Haley for this particular thing, this kind of revolving door politics where, you set out to do good, you stay to do well for yourself. And so that raises the fundamental question of whether or not the FDA employees, is there real motivation to regulate these drug products in a way that's best for the American people? Or is there real motivation and an audition to some way work across the table and take that bureaucratic technical expertise and sell it to the companies to create the hurdles that they themselves know how to jump over and sell that expertise to the companies later? And I think that's an open question. And so that's one of the ways in which they're being captured. What would the world look like without the FDA? That's the question you pose. And I think you're absolutely right. I think people talk about as if it will be a free-for-all. There'll just be tons of products coming on the market and we won't know what's better. In many ways, it might be like the way the cellular phone market is. There's still fierce competition. There's a number of websites that are rating phones all the time. When you're thinking, think about buying a phone, particularly an Android phone, all these sites are rating them. There may be different groups of people who rate cancer drugs differently. I think I'm a very sort of a purist of evidence-based medicine. We would put out, we could arguably put out a set of guidelines. Some insurance companies may decide to go with me because they think, Prasad's guidelines are more evidence-based. They lead to more cost-effective healthcare. Other insurance companies might go with different guidelines, but you would get competition in the marketplace. And then you would allow people to see who's winning. You could actually assess it later and see, which standard actually leads to greater availability of drugs, better outcomes, less toxicity, lower costs, more time at home, which is what people want. We don't get to see that competition. And so in many ways, when we imagine a world without the FDA, it's easy to envision the boogeyman of just a free-for-all. That might not be what it is.
All right, listen up. We got another round with Russell Brand, and this time Tulsi Gabbard's on the mic dropping truth. She's spilling the facts on how the Democrat Party be moving like straight-up dictators, taking away voters' rights to democracy. It's some heavy stuff. If you want to get the full lowdown, hit up the link in the description.
We are being instructed to fear in the form of Donald Trump is already upon us in the form of this technocratic yet technological dictatorship. It's already arrived.
Yes, it's more than a feeling, it's fact. The evidence backs it up, and it's a very intentional strategic move for the Democrat elite's narrative to be warning the American people, saying crazy things like, if you vote for Donald Trump, if he is allowed to win this election, it'll be the last election the United States ever has, that he will be the dictator in chief, painting this dark, bleak picture that you've just outlined, when the facts and the evidence show that they have already created this. And this is exactly the problem. They are weaponizing our public institutions. They're using the Department of Justice and law enforcement to go after their major political opponent in Donald Trump, but also going after our fellow Americans. When President Biden said, over half the country, I think he said 76 million voters in America are MAGA extremists, and they pose this greatest threat, a domestic threat to our democracy. He painted a target on the backs of tens of millions of Americans who voted against him and for the other guy, voted for Donald Trump. And President Biden spoke to the country saying they are the greatest threat we face. When you look at the kind of implications that has on our society, and you look at the reality that parents are getting arrested for going to Board of Education meetings and standing and very passionately speaking about their child's education, or their fear and anger around the fact that their gentleman in Loudoun County in Virginia, where I happen to be today, he stood up and his daughter was sexually assaulted by a boy who claimed to be a girl in the girls' bathroom. And instead of the school and the Board of Education actually doing something about it and holding this kid and his family responsible for this, they quietly transferred him to another school without saying anything, without telling the parents of this girl who was sexually assaulted. And guess what? Within a very short period of time, this boy went on to sexually assault another girl in the girls' bathroom, even as he claimed to be now a girl. There are so many examples of how Donald Trump is the face of this figure who is being targeted. They are throwing everything but the kitchen sink, trying to tie him up in court, drain him of time and money and resources, smear his character, put out this narrative that they hope will cause voters to turn away from him and throw up their hands and say, well, I guess Joe Biden's the only option. But it's also happening to Americans who you will likely never know the names of. The consequences of this and the precedent that it sets. And you're exactly right. It is the elected leaders. It is the bureaucrats. It is the administrative state, many layers down, who are executing this. And the dangerous thing is they're doing this in the name of democracy. They're telling us we have to do this to save democracy. They are so terrified of free people in a free society, getting the information wherever we want to get it, discerning that information and making up our own decisions, particularly as it relates to this upcoming election, that they're trying to get Donald Trump off the ballot.